She tried that. That was good. Yeah, if you're here for the public hearing, you don't have to sign up. Okay. I'll ask you anybody would like to see.
Good evening. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Town of Wendell Board of Commissioners. Thank you for all being here. We have a full house. That's always nice. There's some special things happening tonight. Our Pledge of Allegiance is going to be led by Boy Scout Pack 515, and I've already forgotten your name. I didn't write it down. Tell me your name.
Joe.
We're going to be hearing from Joe. What's your last name?
Creebout.
Joe Creebout. So if you'll step up here to the podium, y'all can all do it. Get by the microphone. You get behind it by the microphone. There you go.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, fellas, so much for being here with us tonight, and I apologize, Joe, you told me and it went right in and right out, and I apologize for that. Our invocation tonight is going to be brought to us by the Wendell Baptist Church, Greg Lane. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you. So on behalf of the Council of the Churches, just a quick thank you to the community. We put out about 2,400 bags between Saturday and then tomorrow night, thanks to some rain Saturday. We'll be picking them up this Saturday, so just thanks to the community for the support on the local food drive. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to come together, and thank you for this great town and community that we are blessed to live in. Most of all, we want to thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, so that we can have a relationship with you. We ask tonight that you'll bless this time with understanding and compassion and be filled with your love. We ask you tonight, Lord, to help us make wise decisions, but ultimately to achieve your will. Help all that we do be just for that, for your will. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you again for being with us tonight. Do we have any adjustments of the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
We have no one signed up for public comment tonight. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And now, item number 4 is the recognition of the Wendell U10 All-Star State Champions. We have a state championship basketball team this year. And we're going to hear from Mr. Stacy Austin, the coach. He's also the principal at East Wake High School, so he's a busy fella. And he can introduce us to his coaches, his assistants, and the players, and then we have something special for y'all.
All right. Good evening. First of all, we would like to thank the town of Wendell for giving us the opportunity to, first of all, have a basketball program, as well as giving us the opportunity to have an all-star team. Very exciting group of young men. I think we acquired a little bit more than just winning a state championship basketball. We kind of got a bond going. You couldn't ask for such a better group of young men, all of them very respectful, mannerable. We had a lot of fun over the course of about a month. I think the parents were probably tired than the kids because we practiced almost every day, but it paid off. And so I had an awesome coaching staff. I had 2 assistants. I had Labert Rush and I had Kelly Fox. That it made practice run very smooth when you have 3 knowledgeable coaches where you can take kids individually and work on specific skills that they need to develop. And I think that really paid off in the long run. I'm gonna call the kids up as if everybody understand. We actually played Fuquay Verena 4 out of the 8 times. Fuquay was in our sectionals. They came in runner-up behind us in the sectionals, and so 2 teams advanced to the state, and we end up playing them twice to win the state championship. So I think Fuquay kind of probably has a issue with the town of Wendell right now.
I have to tell you, I ran into the mayor of Fuquay Verena the next day, and I really ribbed him bad. So y'all need to be ready. And I believe y'all are the first state champion basketball team we've ever had, I think.
I know we are in 10U, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if we've had many. Where's Jeff? We've had 2 others. I know it's not as many as typically baseball, and we're just so proud of y'all.
So thank you.
But remember next year, so get ready to start practicing soon.
Based on our team, we had 10 players on our team, and 8 of them are 10 years old. So 8 of the 10 will be moving up to 11. Well, it'll be 12U. So hopefully, I don't want to jinx ourselves, but hopefully we can compete again. So on our team, we had, like I said, 10 players. 9 of them were able to make it. 1 Carver's 5th graders are on their DC trip. So that player who's not able to be here is Michael Jamal Tabron. Next, we had Sean Austin, Trent Baker, Tyler Blue, Simba Debnam Pwede, Ben Fox, Chase Glenn, Gavin Marks, Sam Thomas, and Jonathan Vinson. Mayor Gray, I present to you the town of Wendell 10U state champions.
Our Parks and Rec folks felt like the word plaque they gave y'all was really nice, and we wanted something bigger to go in the trophy case at the community center, so, we ordered this for y'all. This will be there forever, recognize what a great man is, so I'm very proud of y'all. I feel real strongly it's important that we toot our own horn sometimes because no one's going to do it for us. So I'm real proud of these young men. All right, item number 5 is a facade grant application requested for 28 North Main Street. Mr. Reedy.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the board. Tonight, you're asked to review, discuss, and take action on the facade grant for 28 North Main Street, which is the general store. It was the only application that we received, or first and only application we received for this April 1st application period. At the Appearance Commission last Monday, they voted 6-0 to approve the application, or recommend approval of the application in the amount of $1,000. On March 2nd, the application was submitted by the building owner, Regina Harmon. The application is to replace the blue fabric awning with a red standing seam metal awning on the building. The property is located in our DMX zone. The total estimated cost for the project is $2,275. The amount applied for by the applicant is the full $1,000. The staff has reviewed the application and deemed it complete with all the details necessary. And there's a photo of the existing facade, and that's a mock-up similar of what it would look like just on top of the general store, but in red. Staff recommends to the Board of Commissioners that that you review the recommendation and recommends approval of the facade grant.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Reedy?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the facade grant request for 28 North Main Street.
All right, we have a motion to approve the facade grant for 28 North Main Street. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Item number 6 is a discussion of a request for bike lane fee in lieu for Phase 2 of Woodlands of Timberlake. Mr. Reedy.
Back in September of 2007, the Woodlands of Timberlake Phase 2 plat was recorded by the developer, Johnny Watson. That plat was shown as Attachment A in your packet. That included several lots along Wendell Boulevard that were intended at the time for commercial development, including a about half-acre lot identified as Lot 101. On June 1st, 2017, Mr. Watson recorded a plat to recombine several of those commercial lots along Raymond Drive to allow for additional residential units in place of some of the commercial lots that were not attracting development interest. This recombination left the commercial lot on the corner of Wendell Boulevard and Raymond Drive in the originally platted configuration. Since that time, the applicant has approached town staff about splitting the corner lot into 2 residential lots, which is Attachment C. That proposed subdivision of the lot would require the installation of the bike lane along Wendell Boulevard that's required by our transportation plan. The frontage along Wendell Boulevard already has curb and gutter, which was installed by Mr. Watson as part of the Timberlake project back in 2007. Since that time that we used CDBG funds to put a sidewalk in place that connects Oliver House towards downtown Wendell. So he completed what was required at that time for that development, but since he's coming back to change it, that would require the bike lanes. So in staff's opinion, removing that curb and gutter and recently installed sidewalk for the installation of such a short linear footage of the bike lane would be overly burdensome for the applicant and not really accomplish a whole lot of 155 feet of bike lane. Instead, staff suggested submitting a fee in lieu request as a manageable alternative. On March 29th, the developer asked staff to move forward with processing the bike lane fee in lieu request for that west side of Wendell Boulevard, which is Attachment D, which is allowed by the UDO. All requests must be granted by the Board of Commissioners. So, as it stated, the UDO requires that an engineer's estimate be provided for the work required. That estimate for 155 feet is $3,062, which was verified by the town's engineer, AMT Engineering. If approved, the amount would be required to be provided to the town prior to recordation of that recombination plat. The town could then use those funds to make transportation improvements where needed. There's a photo of the lot. You see the existing curb and gutter and sidewalk. Staff believes that that fee in lieu amount is a reasonable request based on current site conditions and recommends approval of the request.
Does anyone have any questions from Mr. Reedy? Comments?
So Patrick, the factor here is the fact that there's curb and gutter and sidewalks there, and that's why we don't want to.
Yeah, so it's basically from where the mouse is pointing up to the corner. So the burden of ripping all that out that's been done fairly recently just for that short amount of bike lane seems to not very well accomplish what we try to do as far as keeping things moving along for the town.
I've got 2 questions for you. This fee has been verified by our engineer. This is not something that we just dreamt up.
Correct.
And are we looking at replacing one of the prioritized areas of sidewalk with this money?
I'm not sure what the exact plan is, but I think typically we try to fill in sidewalk projects when we can.
But this wouldn't particularly fall under the policy we have in place
As far as
with
that they could
sidewalks,
put it
because
into,
this is a bike lane.
correct,
That's different.
yeah.
I would like to see it put under that,
I would too.
especially the section of Wendell Boulevard between Academy Street and about where the fire station is. There's sidewalk on neither side of Wendell Boulevard. And a lot of people walk into the two grocery stores that are up there. I mean, there's trails in the grass where there's so many people that walk, and I really would like to see those areas prioritized for that sidewalk improvement, but.
Yeah, I think the spirit of that idea for us was to improve non-vehicle transportation, so I think,
Yeah.
It's still a transportation
Yeah.
need.
I see this as a ridiculous thought to tear all the sidewalk and gutter to put in that short stretch of bike lane. So I think this is a reasonable request. I'll make a motion to approve the fee in lieu of request. Phase 2 of Woodlands at Timberlake.
Can we include in your motion? that-
Yeah, and I'll include with that be used to, that $3,000 and $3,062 be used to improve one of the high-need sidewalk areas.
All right, so we have a motion to grant the fee in lieu of and take the $3,062 and apply it towards our prioritized sidewalk need list. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yes, one thing.
Yeah.
It will be my suggestion that, staff come back at our next meeting and recommend the area that we're gonna
Okay.
fix with this money, because, if I were a betting man, I would say that one of those two particular sections of sidewalk is gonna cost more than the money allotted. So
Right.
if we don't have any in the pot for that, we need to pick, something, section that we can complete with the funds provided,
Okay.
that is still a high priority.
So do we want to amend your motion to have them come back to us with that, or do we need to do that? We don't need to do that?
Let's
He
see the
said we
motion
don't
along,
need
and we can talk about a snapshot later on if we
Okay,
want to.
okay. Okay, so any other discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor? All right, great. Item number 7 is a public hearing to consider a zoning text amendment to Chapter 9 and 13 of the UDO as they relate to roadway infrastructure improvement requirements. Mr. Bergmark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. As stated, this is a public hearing for a text amendment looking at 2 chapters of the UDO related to when road infrastructure improvement requirements would kick in for existing sites that are expanding. Tonight, we're asking to, of course, hold the public hearing and take action if you feel prepared to do so. Action could consist of adopting the ordinance you have attached. So for a little bit of background, Chapter 9 covers all of our road requirements, circulation standards, and so forth. Within Chapter 9 is language that relates to all roads when new development or redevelopment occurs with frontage on existing publicly maintained streets, that developer is required to make improvements to that street frontage to meet the UDO standards. There's also further language within Section 9.5 which relates specifically to our collectors and thoroughfare roads that again basically says that when you have a development plan touching one of these roads that you have to make the improvements called for by our plans. We do have certain exceptions built in for family subdivisions, for just putting a single house on a large 10-acre tract that we put in place when we were going through our transportation plan process. But what we don't have is any type of differentiation for making improvements when it's a new site compared to when it's an expansion to an existing site. We do have some differences when it comes to sidewalks or landscaping or parking standards, then those are contained within Chapter 13. But when it comes to the improvements to the roadway itself, that could be adding a bike lane, curb and gutter, or even an additional travel lane, there isn't language that really differentiates a new site compared to expanding an existing site. So in staff's opinion, the current language, and I should have specified this is a town-initiated, something that came about somewhat when, from a site they're looking at expanding, kind of brought it to our attention, but it is the town initiating this request, or town staff, I should say. So in our opinion, the current language could be overly burdensome as applied in that you could have a very small 5% expansion that technically by the language of the UDO, 5% expansion to a building could require suddenly an additional travel lane to be added or an additional bike lane or one of these types of roadway improvements. So as a result, we're proposing to include some language within Chapter 13 and some references within Chapter 9 to that new language to establish a minimum threshold of expansion which must take place before this type of expensive roadway improvement would be kicked in. So currently Chapter 13 does have a threshold of 25% expansion for other improvements that I mentioned, the sidewalks, the landscaping, the parking. So originally what we proposed when this was presented to the planning board was to apply that same standard 25% expansion to a building to be the trigger for when roadway improvements would get kicked in as well. We also suggested that any expansion of 2,500 square feet or less be exempt from the roadway improvement requirements, regardless of what percentage that may be of the building. So if it's a 2,000 square foot building and they want to add another 800 square feet, they wouldn't be subject to this. This would ensure that a very small business, and this could be something like we have dentist offices that are in old homes that have been converted, or same things for attorney offices. They might be in a 2,000 square foot building. They could make a reasonable expansion without kicking in something that's going to basically make them change their mind and not expand their site. Building expansions would be tracked cumulatively, meaning that you couldn't circumvent this requirement by putting in a 20% expansion year 1, additional 20% year 3, and an additional 20% year 5. So we would track this, so it would be capped as a total and tracked over time. At their March meeting, the planning board recommended differentiating expansions of heated square footage versus unheated. So they proposed that the 25% threshold be applied when you're talking about expanding heated square footage, but if it's unheated space, that could be enclosed or even open-sided, that the threshold be increased to 50% in that case, because it's not as significant of an investment on the developer's behalf. The proposed changes in this text amendment would allow small expansions to existing development without creating an economic disincentive to improving one site, but at the same time, it'd still ensure that when you are making a more significant expansion, that we are getting the same improvements that would come into place if it were a new development. So in terms of the actual language, as I mentioned in Chapter 9, there's just a single sentence being added to refer them to the section in Chapter 13 that's being modified. So there's 9.3, and 2 sections of 9.5 that have that reference. Within Chapter 13 itself, Chapter 13 or Section 13.2 is the summary applicability matrix. So you'd have language saying that again, site changes which would initiate improvements will be counted cumulatively from the effective date of this ordinance. And on this chart, which kind of details the different improvements and when they kick in for when you're making different changes to a site, there was a column, you see it highlighted in red, it says road improvement. It previously just said sidewalk improvement. So we essentially just expanded that section to be inclusive of sidewalks and road improvements and added a new footnote in the road improvement column and referenced the section 13.9 that we've amended, so that footnote where it has a little D next to the check mark would essentially tell you that the 25%, which is what that row usually represents, applies for heated, but for unheated space it could go up to 50%. And that same language would be within the paragraph that we've added within 13.9 that says for an existing non-residential or multifamily use, if there's an expansion of heated space greater than 25% of the total square footage of the building, or an expansion of unheated space, whether it's enclosed or open-sided, greater than 50% of the total square footage of the building, then the lot shall fully comply with the roadway improvement requirements of Chapter 9. And it also references that 2,500 square foot where you couldn't expand with that amount without kicking all this in. This does not get you out of right-of-way dedication, but that's not at least as much of a direct cost to a developer. And then finally, in that same section, I just wanted to clarify that there was existing language that talked about when sidewalk improvements are required. So this new language doesn't suddenly change that. So the sidewalk improvements really gets kicked in more when you're adding a certain amount of impervious area. So just wanted to make it clear that that did still apply. As I mentioned, the planning board at their March 19th meeting voted 4-3 in favor of amending staff's original proposal to make it allowable to go up to 50% for unheated square footage expansions before roadway improvements are required. And you do have that amended language. The planning board's recommendation is incorporated into your ordinance that you have for adoption. There's also a statement of plan consistency and reasonableness incorporated into that document that references Principle 8 of our comprehensive plan. And staff is in support of the proposal before you. Be happy to take any questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Bergmark?
The 4-3 planning board vote, what were some of the planning board's concerns about this? Because I'm not really seeing too many.
Well, Mr. Lancaster is very pro private property rights, so his was more of an objection to the development requirements in general. And I believe it was Mr. Swaim and Ashley Anderson that voted against it with him, yes. Interestingly, Mr. Swaim actually originally made a motion to just accept it as written by staff, and that motion did not pass. So I don't know if his voting against this was because he was still in support of staff's original motion. He did not give any other reason, and I'm uncertain for Ms. Anderson.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one. Dave, you said this was initiated by town staff, but I guess before that, what really brought this about? Was there a current business or developer having issues?
Yeah, so what kind of brought this to the forefront was Wendell Builder Supply. They took over the spot that used to be kind of the trash truck refurbishment center over there off of Wendell Boulevard and Chart House Drive. It's under new ownership, and they're looking at doing some expansions, an expansion on the back side of the building itself, and that's kind of an open-sided expansion, as well as there's a lot behind them that they also own where they're planning 4 new buildings. Again, those are all unheated space back there. So that's part of what brought this to our attention when we were considering what roadway improvements would be kicked in for both that site as well as on the opposite side of Chart House Drive. There's a new development that's being considered. Now, it's new development, so it wouldn't really be subject to this, but that whole discussion is what kind of triggered this.
David, I'm usually kind of on the side of wanting some more, regulation, I guess, but in this case, this is, I'm kind of going the opposite way here. I feel like you had somebody who wanted to come in and take an old building and, refurbish it and use it, and if the building you're talking about is one that, my opinion is very industry specific, I guess. I mean, you're not going to have any kind of business coming in there, so I think somebody that comes in that wants to take this and use this, the fact that they're taking any kind of existing building, and I'll be honest with you, whether it's 25% or 50% or 100%, I think that requiring them to do that much of road improvements is ridiculous. I can understand sidewalk, I can understand parking, landscaping, I can understand some of those little things just to accommodate what will be going on in the place, but I think road improvements are very excessive. And I think this section, it does need some looking at, and just how it applies not only to existing development, but even I think some new development as well too. I think the 2,100 number is, my opinion is even a little low from that standpoint. I guess I'm not usually one that kind of goes and shoots down things a whole lot, but in this case, I see some issues. I think have some bigger problems here. So I think this is a minimal change in my opinion. I think almost more needs to be done. I'd like to see that 20% number higher. I'd like to see the 2,500 number higher. But that's just kind of I'd be happy to take this if this is something that the builder feels is accurate this time, but I would certainly like to have this looked in further for potential more, business-friendly, to make our town, our town is very residential heavy, so making this more of a, making this more friendly with businesses. But that's just my thought.
Anyone else have any comments or thoughts?
Yeah, David, is there a way, so I'm gonna flip it on its head, does the town have the ability, to keep someone from doing roadway improvements? If the code currently requires, let's say, and we'll use this as an example, divided 4-lane in front of it, is there a mechanism for the town to say, no, you can't put divided 4-lane in?
So the UDO calls for a divided 4-lane. Is there a way that we can tell them they can't do that?
Right. I'm gonna do the
Unless
development
it's
would trigger the roadway improvements. It triggers the divided 4-lane, the bike lane, the whole, but is there a way that the town can say, no, you can't do those roadway improvements?
I think we'd have to change our rules, basically. The only other thing I'll mention as well is that if it's a DOT road, you know, we might have to, they might have something where they find an issue, and we might have to kind of work that out with them as well.
So this gets to the crux of my issue with this. This is all fine and dandy, and this is gonna make things better in one very small situation. But we are putting a Band-Aid on something and saying that what we're running from here is the transportation plan. I guess in this case, thankfully for Wendell Building Supply, the expansion that they were doing, there was a distinguishable feature, and in this case, it was unheated square footage, or you know, a different type of building. I guess the reason that I bring up we're running from a problem is, theoretically, the applicant in this situation, Wendell Building Supply, if that was the requirement, if it was divided 4-lane, could come in and say, yep, you know what, no, we're not giving you any fee in lieu of, we're not asking for any relief, we're gonna build it. And they would be responsible for improving the road about 300 feet, and they could make it a divided 4-lane, so you would ride down Wendell Boulevard, and it would go from 2 to 4, back to 2, all in this little spot. If we say, as we said earlier, development's coming, growth is coming, you're gonna start dealing with people that they wanna move quickly, they want the most efficient process, and they wanna do what we were talking about earlier, eliminate future risk. So they're gonna say, no, based on our calculations, it's not gonna get any cheaper than it is today, we're gonna build it today. And you're gonna have really patch road work. The other piece is new development coming in. You can go stand on the property that we're talking about, throw a rock across the road, and if someone comes in and they want to build a big enough new construction right across the road, we're gonna have this same conversation, because they will then be liable for all the improvements that we're fixing right now by making it an unheated square footage thing. But because maybe they don't fit that same mold, they're gonna be liable for this again, and we're gonna be back to the beginning of the conversation. I think what we need to do is address the transportation plan, which is that's the roadway improvements. They're not running away from parking, they're not running away from all the, like Mayor Pro Tem Lutz said, those things are understood. I think in this case, I've actually told staff, look, and I told the applicant, don't bring up sidewalks, man, that's not something you want to broach with this board. But roadway improvements, you're right, doesn't make sense, and I wonder how often people do the research and don't come and don't show up because of it. I understand we need to have better roads, we need to be investing in our future. That said, we don't need to see every new business that comes to town as a direct deposit into our general fund, because we're not ready for the roads that we want. So I'm going to vote for this because I feel like it alleviates the current problem. I'm voting for it, in my mind, to stop the bleeding until we can fix the problem.
I would just like to add, to your point and to Mayor Pro Tem Lutz's point, there is a solution to this problem. However, it's not within our grasp, and it's called an impact fee. And the state legislature has basically taken that arrow out of our quiver. In a perfect world, the small business comes in and they pay a small impact fee for road improvements, for things like that. Large businesses come in or make improvements, they pay large impact fees. And then, that money is set aside for exactly what it was intended for, which is transportation, whether it be for vehicles, whether it be for pedestrian, whether it be for sidewalks, whether it be for whatever. So there is a solution. However, it's not available to us, and so that's why we're here arguing about these patchwork, Band-Aid improvements and tweaking the language on all these other sorts of things, is because, we can't really, we're basically, our hands are tied for any tenable solution to this problem. And I don't, that doesn't affect the decision we're gonna make here today, I don't think, but, I don't want people to think that there's a lack of ideas out here for how to deal with these situations. I just want people to understand how and who put us in the situations that we're in.
Any other comments, questions?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion.
We got to have a public hearing first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
That's okay. All right, public hearing is now open. If anyone wishes to speak in favor or opposition of the zoning text amendments for chapter 9 and 13, you step forward.
Good evening. I'm David Perry, the owner of Wendell Builder Supply. And I just want to say, excuse me, thank you for allowing me to speak and giving me this opportunity to be here in your community. And thank you for your service. I do a lot of service in Goldsboro where I live, so I appreciate the time and effort that it takes for you guys to do your job and stay away from your family and from your job. So thank you for doing that. We're excited to be here in Wendell. We're here because we feel like it's a great place to be, a great place to live and do business. I don't feel any different about that. But I will say that this regulation has been cumbersome for us. This is our 6th building supply store that we built, and this is unfortunately probably the worst one as far as regulation is concerned. Hearing your conversations tonight has been very, it's good to hear you guys have that dialect and recognize that being pro-business, I think, is good because it creates jobs. And I know in my community I want to create jobs for people to move there, my kids and whatnot. So I hope that you see the benefit of that. And but I just want to say thank you so much for allowing us to have the opportunity to be here, and I would appreciate you giving consideration to accept the recommendation from the planning board and from the, I guess that was from the planning board. So thank you for that. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. If anyone has any questions, I'll be trying to answer them.
You said you have 6 locations?
This will be our 6th one, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's one in Goldsboro.
Yes, sir.
Where are the others?
Mount Olive, Kinston, Fayetteville, and Morehead City. And actually, I forgot to mention this, but I actually was here in 1999, and I built it's now Compass Self Storage up on Wendell Boulevard. I built it as Carolina Mini Storage in 1999. So, I thought Wendell was a great place back then, and I still do. And that's why we're back here to do business again. Any other questions?
Were there any other burdensome things that you came across in addition to this that you'd like to share?
No, I'll say the staff here that we've dealt with, the inspections and these guys and the planning, they've been as accommodating as they could. I understand they're doing their job, and I respect that. And I think they come out with a can-do attitude rather than, hey, this isn't going to work and you can't do this. They say, well, this is what the regulations say. Let's see how we can make this thing work. And I think if you continue to have that attitude and that culture, that you'll work through these opportunities and you'll see your town, continue to grow. And I think that's just what it's all about.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Council. I just want to thank Mr. Perry for coming to Wendell to do business here. But at the same time, I'm not saying anything against our planning staff. They do a good job with what they have to work with. But they have a UDO and a transportation plan that makes it almost impossible to see Wendell grow. Every time you come to this meeting that I can remember, you have had to make some kind of text amendment or some change to the UDO. We bought a document some years ago from some company that they wrote for some town, and they put our name on it. And we've got a set of rules and regulations that we're trying to work with. that's almost impossible. And you spend a lot of your time trying to correct the document. And I don't know the answer, whether you need to throw it in the trash can and start over, or whether you need to take the time to go through it and try to make it so that it is workable. The process that this gentleman's had to go through is really kind of ridiculous. A lot of times people will come to Wendell and you hand them a copy of the UDO, you don't ever see them again. And how many businesses are we losing because of that? And these recommendations that you're getting from the planning board are well and good, but when you look at some of the people who are making those decisions, they're not engineers, they're not builders, they're not developers, they're citizens that don't really know a lot about what this is all about. So when this stuff comes to you, I hope that you will take the time and the effort to try to figure out what's best. Just like here, you're talking about you putting a Band-Aid on a wound rather than fixing it. You know, if that's the best you can do at this time, fine, but at the same time, let's try to fix these things before we lose any more business because of it. I mean, I'm willing to help. I know a lot of builders and developers and people that would like to sit down and talk about it and help change this UDO so that it could be workable. But, you know, that's my take on it. We're working with a document that's almost impossible, and you're having to try to piecemeal it and make it work. So if there's anything I can ever do to help you with that, I would be happy to do it as a builder and a developer who has to live with it every day. Is there any questions of my comments? Thank you.
Anyone else?
I don't fall down getting up here. Paul White. I wanted to make a comment about the road because I listened and there seemed to be some confusion at the planning board meeting. DOT requires a turn lane, which does widen it there, and I think the building needs it, and that is still happening. That seemed to be some confusion when they were talking in front of the planning board. So I wanted to make sure everybody understood they are planning to build a turn lane to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Public hearing's now closed. Gentlemen, what do y'all want to do?
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to, excuse me, get over my page. Make a motion to approve the zoning text changes to chapter 9 and 13 of the UDO as they relate to roadway infrastructure improvements.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the zoning text amendment to chapters 9 and 13 as they relate to the roadway infrastructure improvements. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Item number 8 is a public hearing continued from March 26, 2018, budget work session on the zoning text amendment to chapters 11 and 17, the UDO as they relate to street lights. Mr. Bergmark?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. As stated, we're bringing this item back to you from our budget work session meeting last time. Changes to 11 and 17 dealing with our streetlight policies and standards. Just a really brief summary is basically we're looking at changing our policy to create the ability where if someone's putting in pedestrian lights, they would kind of take ownership of that. They would contract directly with Duke, and we would reimburse them, but the reimbursements would be based on our standard 300-foot spacing, which is what a typical roadway light, street light would be. I'll be happy to go back into everything if you want, but I'm going to leave it to the pleasure of the board.
Yeah. What do y'all want, fellas? Do y'all want Mr. Bergmark to start at the beginning and go hit the high spots, or what would you like him to do?
I'd say a brief overview,
Okay.
where we've come from to where we're at.
Okay. Just We did talk about money last time, how much the town currently spends. Just as a reminder, we spent last year around $125,000, and that doesn't include Wendell Falls, because they have their own contracts. That would add about another $13,000. So right now, our streetlight policy, we have the developers pay us kind of a large upfront fee to cover what, if they're doing a streetlight that's more than our basic streetlight. So our basic streetlight's a wood pole, Cobra head type style light on it, spaced every 300 feet. So if they're looking to do something that is more expensive than that, whether it's because the pole and the fixture itself is more expensive or decorative, or because they're doing pedestrian style poles, so those might be 16 to 18 feet rather than 25 feet tall, and they're generally spaced out every 150 feet for a pedestrian pole. So whether it's a more expensive normal pole or pedestrian poles, there's kind of a gambit of prices it can be. Our current policy would say if you're going to do something that's more expensive than a wood pole with a Cobra head light, then you need to pay us that difference per pole over a 20-year span, which is our typical contract with Duke Energy. That costs the developer a lot of money up front. It also costs the town a lot of money over the long term or mid to long term, because based on the calculations that staff ran, after typically 11 years, that amount that they have paid us is used up, and we're just now paying this increased amount for the indefinite future to Duke. As a result, what we were looking at doing was creating a policy that's more similar to what Raleigh has and what Knightdale has, where if you are doing a non-standard pole, then instead they would contract with Duke directly, and they'd also enter an agreement with the town. So they'd have an agreement with Duke and an agreement with the town. And what we would do is we would look at what the standard cost would be to put our standard pole every 300 feet spaced apart, and then we would reimburse them that cost. So they're paying directly for their lights with Duke, but we're paying them what we know it would cost if they just put in our standard poles at 300 feet. We are also looking at changing our standard pole a little bit from the wood pole to a fiberglass pole. It is slightly more expensive, but it's a pretty minimal difference. I think it was an extra $1 per pole a month, and we thought it was a nice upgrade for this town to have. We did kind of an analysis looking out, 20 years or 40 years, and we used an example of 255 lots using a standard Mitchell open fixture, and what that could be over time. And so under the existing policy, by year 20, we're paying about twice as much for a pedestrian light. Over 40 years, we could be paying 3 times as much. And for a 250 lot subdivision, that upfront fee that I mentioned, that could be, if they're using pedestrian lights, that could be anywhere from $140,000 to $265,000, depending on the fixture that they choose. As I mentioned, generally year 11 right now is when it typically goes from where the town's now paying more than we would have otherwise paid, because that upfront money they've given us has been all used up by that point. So under the proposed policy, again, the standard street light would now be a 25-foot tall fiberglass pole rather than wood pole. Using that fiberglass would cost a little bit more, but even for a 250 lot subdivision, over a 40-year span, you're only talking about $12,000. So over 40 years, that's chump change. And by year 40, the town's cost for a 250 lot subdivision, if they were using pedestrian poles, would be reduced by $250,000 to $380,000 roughly, compared to the existing policy. The cost per dwelling for HOA residents, because essentially the HOA would be paying the monthly bills to Duke, would be anywhere from $3 to $5 for an average size subdivision. A denser one like Wendell Falls, it might only be a couple of bucks to have that improved lights. Let's see. We've talked some about met with some of the different developers to discuss it. Lucius Jones expressed some concerns over this. He actually chose in his next phase of growth to just go ahead and put in the fiberglass poles rather than the pedestrian style poles. So that is one thing you could see is some people might choose to do that. Edgemont Landings and Wendell Falls currently have contracts directly with Duke, and we've been discussing working out an agreement with Wendell Falls to do a reimbursement agreement with them. and Edgemont was very much in favor of the policy as well. Oh yes, I should mention that this policy would reduce the number of zoning districts which require pedestrian streets. Right now, there's a number of districts that are meant to be more mixed-use districts that you are required by the UDO to put them in rather than your standard taller road lighting. So that would be reduced really to just get down to the DMX district. Outside of that, it would be, you could elect to do that. Many, if they're wanting to have that look or have that feel, would choose to do so, but there's fewer zoning districts that would outright require it by the UDO. I think that may satisfy, but I can go through more of this if needed.
Have any questions for Mr. Furlong? Did that answer your questions?
Has there been any other developers that have expressed any significant concerns with this light pole deal? And more specifically, not wanting to go under contract directly with Duke?
Not really, although with that said, you know, the builders who are building within Foxborough, Woods of Blair Hills, or, you know, those ones, you know, this is already dealt with before they're coming. This is a developer issue, not a builder issue. So we just, you know, haven't had that many new developments. So that in terms of the new developments, the people we listed, you know, with Groves of Deerfield, with Lucius, D.R. Horton in Edgemont, and Wendell Falls, those are pretty much the only new ones we've had that would have dealt with this.
David, if a developer chooses to not form an HOA, then is he himself, is the developer then responsible for these costs? I mean, it sounds like if they do a HOA, then they can kind of pass some of these upgraded costs along to the HOA. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. So if they do the pedestrian lights, then their HOA would be paying those monthly bills. The developer would really only be responsible for that underground connection fee, which is just a one-time fee that Duke requires.
And so if they chose not to do HOA, then is that falling on the developer then to keep paying?
If they're not doing an HOA the way it's set up, then they would essentially have to use they wouldn't be able to use the pedestrians. They'd have to use our standard, which is now the fiberglass pole every 300 feet.
So they couldn't even do pedestrian if they wanted to at that point?
No, it's just not, you know, if this is supposed to be going on indefinitely in the future, not having an agency, you know, HOA agency on there to be kind of that responsible party, it just gets legally very messy if it's just an individual who's then that owner of this entire streetlight system.
The only thing, and I think I made this comment last time, I just think it's a deterrence to use a nicer pole, a decorative pole, and Mr. Jones brought up a good point last time. We didn't put fiberglass poles on Main Street. You know, we did something a little bit more decorative because it was nicer. You know, for the figures you gave us, it would add to the HOA fees, and you look at the average tax that is paid per household, that's not a big tab to pick up by the town. And I know the figures you gave us over 40 years look big, but if it adds $5 to a house, that's not that big of a deal if the development gets a nicer fixture. And I just think it's a deterrence for, you know, putting in nicer stuff.
Let's say two things. One, to echo some of David's comments, or Commissioner Myrick's comments, that the biggest problem I have with it is what was just highlighted, that without an HOA, you can't have pedestrian poles. If we go back to the last case, we were talking about, Commissioner Boyd was talking about impact fees. Everybody pays a little, everybody pays a lot, and everyone's completely fine. I think in that case, encouraging for the town to be able to use this practice. If we step over into this argument, we now require someone to set up a, for lack of better terms, legally binding miniature government in order to have nicer things. I completely understand town staff's idea here. I think the numbers are fine. I like the idea of getting away from wood poles. That said, I live in a development that's got wood poles, and I'll probably have wood poles when I don't live in that development, and I don't plan on moving. I think we're possibly cutting our nose off to spite our face. I understand the idea, but I am with David here, pay me now, pay me later. You're gonna pay to an HOA, fine. You can pay the town, fine. At the end of the day, we're responsible for, this arrangement, or we wouldn't be all in the middle of it. So the other more, striking piece for me is, I've sat on this board now, this will be my third budget. This has never come up in the budget. This has never been something that, oh, if we didn't have to do the lights, we could expand Parks and Rec. It's never come up. So it's kind of hard for me to see this as something that's just a recurring thorn in our side. I appreciate the effort and the intent, but I'm a fan of having a better looking Wendell, especially when you've already had a policy that incentivized it for years, and now you're going to pull it back. You're not going to hurt the big developments. You're going to hurt the smaller infills that people just want to build on their land and build a little subdivision, and they don't want an HOA.
How is this going to impact big developments?
Well, and I'm glad you asked that, because one of the things I want to bring up, I mean, I'm hearing a concern that, we're going to end up with fewer pedestrian lights. People aren't going to choose this, whether it's because they don't want an HOA or just because we've now opened it up to where it's not required in as many districts. But our existing policy has been essentially rejected by two of our well, really all the three subdivisions that I mentioned. Groves Deerfield chose to just change it to be the 300-foot spaced road light. Edgemont contracted directly with Duke in order to avoid the upfront fee. Wendell Falls contracted directly with Duke in order to avoid the upfront fee. So to me, that tells me there's a problem with the existing policy. That doesn't mean necessarily what we've proposed here is the solution. We could look at something else, but to me, our existing policy is not working for developers.
So the figure given of $3 to $5 per unit in increased cost.
Yep.
In order to raise $4 per unit, what kind of, how many pennies on the property tax rate would we have to increase to cover that if over time we move to everyone, every new development has these lights? We're talking about 40 years down the road. How many pennies is it going to take in property tax increase to cover that?
Well, hopefully it'll be less. I think right now, we've gone up somewhat, but I think our penny now is it closer to 50,000? Around 50,000, a penny.
But I'm saying, how much would we have to raise our rate today to get an extra $4 out of every house in Wendell? Is it 1 cent? Is it 2 cents?
I'd have to go back and do the calculation on the number of households.
How many houses are in Wendell Falls, or how many lights are in Wendell Falls? I know that was an example you were using currently with theirs.
I'm trying to remember if it was 140 some?
Something so far.
So far in that range?
Yeah.
So theoretically, it would take at least 1,000 of these lights before you'd even get into 1 cent on the, if it's $3 to $4 increase, it would take you multiplying that out. 1,000 of the decorative lights before you reached a on the tax rate per year. The reason the number looks alarming is kind of what Commissioner Merrick pointed out, is that it's over time. You're looking at a bigger number.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. What I was simply asking is in 40 years, how much of a tax increase are we going to be looking at in order to pay for these lights, as opposed to what we're paying for them today? Basically, how much would we have to increase the property tax today to raise another $4 from every house in Wendell?
Would we have to increase the property tax to cover these?
Well, I mean, so you're putting up a $300 light pole, you're building a $200,000 house behind it, that theoretically the property tax on that, the new house that's there.
I completely understand that, but that's not what I asked. What I asked was if we wanted to squeeze every house in Wendell for an extra $4 right now, how many pennies on the property tax would it take to do that? I believe it to be less than one, I think it's about half, it's the back of my
We've got
envelope.
about, I'm trying to think of how many units we even have right now.
How many housing units?
Yeah, yeah,
Probably 2,500 or
yeah,
something in that range.
About 2,500 is probably what we've got.
And the other side of this question is just, who do you want to make responsible? Do you want to make this a community-wide tax, or should the neighborhood that's kind of directly benefiting from the fancier light poles within their subdivision be responsible versus you can argue, yes, this has some benefit to the entire community. I mean, the nicer a subdivision is, the more it kind of benefits the entire community to an extent, but there's more of a direct benefit to the people that actually live in the area.
Well, there is, but, so the neighborhood I live in has pedestrian light poles. It has the nicer pedestrian light poles, and guess what? The developer didn't have to pay a higher fee, and the town's already currently paying for the lights that are in mine, and my neighborhood doesn't have an HOA, and I don't pay HOA dues for those nicer lights. And so, they're already being covered by my tax dollars. And, I don't think it's that huge of a burden, especially when you look at it through the lens of, when you're putting up much nicer lights, there's gonna be a much nicer house. We're not going down the dirt roads of Wendell, and putting up pedestrian lights. They're going in where new development's going in, so it should be paying for itself, I do think. I agree with you, you're saying that there's a problem when developers are coming in and thinking of their own solutions to get around, what we're doing, there's a problem. But I also wonder what happens if an HOA that's been responsible for these lights disbands, because that is allowable. HOAs can vote to dissolve, then what? We're gonna be on the hook for that money anyway, or we're gonna turn the lights off, so.
Per the agreement, I think that they're supposed to convert it back, but what happens if they just have, I don't know what legal loopholes you might have to go through, and are you really gonna be able to force them to do that?
Yeah, I'm not gonna go repost somebody's light poles.
I think there's a couple of things here as far as what the cost is to the town, as well as the policy that Duke has changed. One of the reasons that it costs so much is that Duke requires an underground fee of $500 per pole. If the town is going to be the one that's gonna accept that, then that's part of the development. We're gonna require the developer to pay us that $500 per pole up front, because that's going in the ground. One of the other options they had, just like with Regiment Landings and Wendell Falls, is since they put that in their name, they are paying that $500 over a long period of time, instead of having to pay it up front. So we've got a fee that we're recouping up front, as well as the difference for that 20-year period of time is the reason it gets so outrageous a number up front for a new development coming in. We used to didn't have that. Duke didn't have that. A lot of things have changed over a period of time. And maybe when your subdivision went in, Duke, I'd have to go back and look whether or not Duke charged that $500 per pole underground fee. I don't know.
I think all the utilities were put in that neighborhood in 08 or before.
If that fee is sticker shock to the developer, even if we go along with this policy, they're gonna have to pay it, right?
Well, if they put it in their name, then they can work out an agreement with Duke Power to pay it over that $500 so much per month over a long period of time, over the life of that 20-year period.
Is there logic to the argument that everyone that's needed to get around this policy has apparently gotten around this policy to this point? I mean, everyone.
Well, but they're just paying for it entirely, and the town's not paying for any of it. So this is an attempt to be a little bit more fair and to give them some reimbursement, acknowledging that providing light in neighborhoods is a basic responsibility of a municipality.
So if lighting in a neighborhood is a basic responsibility of a municipality.
There's a light that's $9 and there's a light that's $20.
And that's a fundamental decision that you have to make as a town.
Yeah.
I personally think that when you ride, do this, go to 64, come in on Wendell Falls Parkway, come in on Wendell Falls, or come on Wendell Boulevard. Tell me which one looks prettier. Tell me which one is driving more growth. Tell me which one got a write up in the News and Observer as being the hip new place to live. You know, sometimes it's, we, you know, we put flowers on the edges of, bypasses in the center of roads because we think it looks nice and it builds a sense of community, and that's an investment that we're interested in making or interested in having someone make. I think it's a similar argument here.
To me, this whole discussion brings up a, you know, the bigger issue, the elephant in the room would being Duke Power deciding, you know, that willy-nilly they'd need $500 a pole all of a sudden. I'm a builder, not a developer, and the whole UDO light pole thing affects me very, very minimally. I can understand where the upfront cost is an issue. I, for one, would like to see the prettier light poles, obviously, but to me, it's a bigger issue. That I do agree with Commissioner Joyner that, you know, it's part of the taxpayers' services that the town we give them, or services that the town gives them. I feel like we should provide those light poles with them, and possibly, you know, offline come up with some better ways to fund it. You know, the town can't eat but so much. I totally get that. And I would also encourage, and maybe they already are, again, I'm a builder, not a developer, but if I were a big-time developer and I felt like Duke Energy had me backed into a corner, I would probably be lobbying with my development buddies, you know, probably try to find a good lobbyist somewhere to, you know, go make some calls and try to figure out a way to work a deal. I don't know what that is, but there's got to be a solution to it. $500 up front, you know, just seems ridiculous to all of a sudden be able to put those fees on somebody and not give them the opportunity to get it, you know, get out of it or around it. There's got to be a better way.
To look at it a little bit differently, I kind of see it like this. Sort of the agreement is, like for paving streets, you know, it's understood that the developer comes in and paves the street. They pay for the grading, they pay for the sub-base, they pay for the asphalt and the curb and gutter, and then when it's all said and done, as long as they did what they were supposed to do, then the town will take over maintenance and upkeep of it. And this is basically like the asphalt plant saying, oh yeah, we're not just charging you by the ton for asphalt anymore, it's gonna be $500 for every truck you bring in here now. And no, it's not fair to the developer, you know. However, that's between the asphalt plant and the paving company and the developer. And this has come down, basically, Duke has put a $500 fee per light on the developer, and now, you know, we're trying to find ways to put ourselves on the hook for it, and to cost share some of that. And I agree. I don't think that's right. I also think Duke should be able to charge what, you know, they need to charge to hook lights up. I don't know that it's $500 a light, especially when it's probably a developer subcontractor who's running the cables and doing the vast majority of the work, so. But yeah, if all the developers have already found a workaround for this, then. But you're saying if our policy isn't currently working, we should change it, even though it's not technically hindering anybody because they can work around it. Is that basically what we're getting at here?
Depends if you consider us taking no skin in the game, not injuring them. I mean, sure, I basically, if we continued on, we could say, here's our policy, and if they'd say, that's outrageous, we could say, well, you go to Duke directly then. We don't want anything to do with you. We've done it for a few. We could keep doing it, and we could take on the entire cost. I mean, part of this exercise was just trying to highlight what are the costs, because I don't think we'd ever really had this discussion over what is the cost of the town over time, with whether it's the existing policy or the proposed policy. So I mean, yeah, we could certainly, if that was a priority of the town, we could say this is something we want to invest in. But I think we just need to be thoughtful of that and be kind of owning that. Yes, this is where we want to put our tax dollars, is towards this compared to, anytime we do that, we're having a trade-off, this versus something else. And we could certainly say this is something we want to prioritize, and we think we should kind of accept this cost as just the town, but we just need to be aware of what we're doing.
Have we done any projections on commercial tax base and what that looks like over the next few years, and how that increased revenue could help offset the cost of what we're arguing about? Because to me, this is just one more good reason as to why we should be a competitive community and help folks, welcome business into town, such as Goldsboro Building Supply, who is here tonight, where we want to keep standards and it not be the Wild Wild West. We also want to be competitive with other municipalities, and I just feel like we're spending a bunch of time arguing over something that is going to correct itself, in the near future with the way the current economy is going. And maybe I'm wrong, but I definitely think that we need to at least look in it and see what the projections are. And, because if Commissioner Boyette's saying he's also obviously done some sort of quick math from the hip, but at a half a cent per household is what we're discussing, we've wasted our time.
And commercial tax base would definitely help. And yeah, we haven't done, I don't know, we'd be kind of shooting from the hip from a projection standpoint on commercial. And I did want to point out that this policy would not adversely impact businesses coming in. This is really just dealing with subdivisions.
Yeah, and I understand that, but what I'm saying is, if we're a competitive business community, that commercial tax base is going to offset this cost that we're arguing about. It's a minimal cost, per household is what I'm saying.
Why does it only affect residential?
Well, along the commercial, you're generally not going to have pedestrian lights. They're also typically going to be along DOT roads, and that's going to more dictate what kind of pole it is and the spacing and so forth. And generally, we're just going to be responsible for that because it is going to be more of our standard pole. You're not going to see the pedestrian lights used generally on your commercial corridors.
I guess I was thinking, I'm still in chart house, so I was thinking like a long chart house with theoretically those two sidewalks that, as Mr. Vardy likes to point out, start nowhere and end nowhere. But theoretically, I would think that would be a place pedestrian lights would be, and that I would think would impact the developer. They're
going to have Cobra head lights. I mean, you're 25-foot tall Cobra head lights down that road, which you're going to see that almost any time you have commercial.
Anything else? All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. If anyone wants to speak for or in opposition to the zoning text amendments to chapters 11 and 17.
My name is Lucius Jones, 410 Selma Road. Because of this issue, I've decided to just go ahead and put regular poles in my new section of the subdivision because I couldn't stand the $60,000. I noticed that the examples that you've been looking at are 250 lot subdivisions. Well, the only people I know building 250 lot subdivisions is Wendell Falls, and the small builders, and I like I said, I don't have a dog in this fight now because I've already gone ahead and just put in regular poles, but it's not going to be encouraging for your smaller developers to come in and put in pedestrian lights. And I think pedestrian lights are great. I think that's what we ought to do, but at the same time, the developer can't afford to pay $1,000 per house, basically, for the pedestrian light, and that's what I figured it was going to cost us, $1,000 per house. So we didn't do it, but I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice by maybe not differentiating between large developments and smaller developments, because this thing, the way we're going now, we're gonna discourage small builders from putting in pedestrian lights. It's a lot of things in our UDO, as I said earlier, it's written so that you have a point system on water allocation. Well, the same point system goes for a 6-lot subdivision that goes for a 600-lot subdivision, which makes not a lot of sense to me. I had this discussion this afternoon with my engineer. We're in the process of trying to develop another subdivision here in Wendell, but the same rules apply to these great big subdivisions that do to the small ones. And I think this is where we maybe could make some difference as far as deciding a subdivision of so-and-so size could get pedestrian lights without paying more money. But if you're going to do 500,000 lots, then treat it differently. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Public hearing's now closed. What do y'all wanna do?
It doesn't sound like any of us really are in favor of this. We just motion to table this, or?
What would the staff like?
Well, I think some direction, what I'm hearing, it is the concern with the aesthetics of the fiberglass pole in a residential subdivision.
I think also the size of the subdivision is a concern,
And,
maybe some.
and so if we could work, and I think maybe, staff as well as then get additional feedback from the board to head us in the right, the direction that we're wanting to get with the board. I see that change has to be made from our current policy, because large subdivisions and small subdivisions cannot afford being done. Or Wendell Falls Edgemont would not be contracting directly with Duke to get around that upfront cost. So I see the upfront cost difficult for both. But maybe if we could staff, and then maybe we can meet with board members and call and get some feedback, I think maybe we can come up with something. But we do have a process in place right now that small and large cannot afford.
Yeah.
It sounds like the large ones are loving this, but the small ones are completely against it, so I think.
The large ones are loving it because, that's the word, is because they're going and contracting directly with Duke. They cannot afford our policy and to work with the town of Wendell, because that upfront cost is so high that they are having to defer and then go to work with Duke to develop an HOA.
Okay.
So we may need some differentiation there,
Yeah.
small and large.
Find that break-even point.
Okay. Yeah. So, you wanna?
Well, I'll make a motion that, we, send this back to staff for further evaluation, and you're looking at the difference. Do you want to add anything to that, Commissioner Boyette?
No, I do not.
Okay. And then look at the difference between, maybe large and small, and have make policy more refined for each one.
Does this need to be in the form of a motion, or is this, since it's instruction and direction?
Consent and rules committee.
Yeah.
What are we
So-
doing in terms of the public hearing?
Yeah, well, I closed it.
Okay.
And I heard a motion.
And he made a motion that we send it back to staff, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where we have a motion on the table. Okay, so we have a motion to send this back to staff. Do you want to restate it? Thank you.
Make a motion to send this back to staff for, further evaluation on, how to make this more streamlined between larger and small developments.
Okay, so we have a motion to send it back to staff to create some streamlining between sizes of development and come back to us, I guess, is that all right? All right, so any discussion on the motion? You sure? Y'all had a lot to say down there while I was trying to say it. Any discussion?
Is there a time that
No,
you
ma'am.
want to say?
Okay,
I'm
don't make me
concerned-
take you to the principal's
Mayor,
office.
I'm just concerned how David's gonna fit one more line on that flow chart, but
Yeah. All right, what kind of time frame do we want to do this in?
2 years.
I think it'll take us a month or more to sit down and really look at this. We're gonna have to get back with the developments as well as Duke Energy.
I don't feel like this is a very pressing matter right now.
June work session, maybe?
Maybe after budget.
We've got.
That Monday, June 11th.
We got a really heavy June.
Maybe do after budget?
Yeah.
The first meeting in July?
Okay.
Work session in July. Yeah, I like the work
Fine.
session probably.
Okay, so we've got essentially, we're going to come back to this, the first work session in July. All in favor? All right. Item number 9, I'm sorry. Snapshot, I want to take a look at that. Where is it? Let's add on here the, prioritizing the sidewalk that came up earlier, for the, bike lane. Get that on here, and come back to us with some, potential spots for that. Also, has there been a salary adjustment made for Public Works for the increased job responsibilities, for our interim manager or director?
There is a process that we've got in place. One of the things that, we had to look at is when we thought that was gonna be a shorter term period, and now we've had to look at the extension of that, and
Because
so-
he's been in that role a couple months now.
Well,
Pick it up.
And, well, we did think that we would be looking toward the director position.
Right.
Just that has changed. At this time, we've had to adjust accordingly.
But we talked about that when the decision was made to put that on hold, and that's been at least a month ago. So, I'd like something done by the next pay period. I feel like.
That's not a problem.
All right, let's move on it, because we're taking advantage if we don't. Also, we have discussed, and I don't think we need to do it now because we're having a lot of IT decisions that we're having to make, but we have discussed, getting some estimates and things for upgrading the office back there in IT and code enforcement. So can we go ahead and at least get those numbers and know what we're dealing with potentially? I know that may change depending on what we decide with IT, but I think it's looking like, I don't want to speak for the group, but that we're gonna keep what we've got and outsource some things, but she's still got to have a spot here. And it never has, been completed, and I'd like to know, maybe Ms. Hughes can help you more with exactly what she thinks her needs would be. Let's at least start thinking about it. Is there anything else? What's going on with the railroad track crossing?
I just left a voicemail on his voicemail.
There's a sidewalk fee in lieu of issue here. Mr. Jones had the sidewalk put in, and it just so happened to be over on my street. And part of our driveway is cracked, so where, when Public Works went back to review the work that had done to approve it, they noticed that a spot needed a better control joint. And it was because they're trying to marry up new concrete with old concrete.
Right.
At that time, I volunteered to just replace that section, because it's kind of the apron of my driveway.
That's on you. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
And the town manager I've been playing phone tag with the concrete guy.
Okay.
I'll be 100% honest, not something that I've pursued diligently. And the town manager called me last week and politely reminded me that.
Take you to the principal's office.
Yeah,
Go.
so,
All right.
I called him again today, and I hope to have some updates by the next time.
Okay.
Hopefully have that taken care of by the next board meeting.
Anything else? Yeah, anything? All right. Item number 10 is update on board committees for town board meetings. Mayor Pro Tem Lutz, Triangle J, Council of Governments.
Yes, I attended the Triangle J Council of Governments meeting at the end of March, and at this time, Wilson Mills was inducted into the Triangle J, and we heard a presentation on a business that's coming, you know, not really new here, but they're looking at, they just need their foreign trade zone application sponsored. So that was about it.
Okay. Fire Advisory Board, Commissioner Joyner.
At a fire board meeting earlier, or last week, got a little bit more information on the new fire station coming. It was, county commissioners have approved this $7.2 million. And obviously, they are working on their budget. Wendell's fire leadership feels like the budget process will be, while maybe not as smooth as previous years, smooth.
Is that it? All right, thank you very much. Commissioners' reports, we'll start with Commissioner Carroll.
Well, I've got a couple things to say tonight.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, everybody listen up. First, the UDO. This has been over and over and over and over. We've talked about it, and I know that all of us are getting fed up with it, but I feel like this was a document that was put into place while there wasn't any development going on. And unfortunately, most of us were not here during that time, so it's kind of like someone kicked the hornet's nest and ran, and now we're standing here with the jar of honey. So thank you for your patience as we work through it and try to figure out the best options and resolutions for the issues that we're facing. Thanks to staff for all the effort, in the back and forth. It's frustrating for everybody, but we'll get through it. And thank you for the community partners that are doing the developing and their patience, as I'm sure it's a burden. I opened my board packet and happened to notice the Zebulon Times. So I thought that was good, and I know Commissioner Joyner had to be happy about that. Seemed to be the only one that was a real fan of the East Wake News. I, for one, was happy to see it go, but I am happy that we do have a good, what seemed to be a non-biased publication that was well put together and actually captured my attention and had me reading it for a little while last night. My wife walked into the room and wanted to know what was going on because I was sitting there quiet reading. So, and lastly, I would like to congratulate the U10 All-Star team on their victory, and also Stacy Austin's commitment to our young folks. So my wife was a teacher before she became a stay-at-home mom, and I understand how taxing that is for someone who really cares. And for him to be a principal and as active as he is and all the great things that he does, he's already, in my opinion, planting the seed and investing in our youth, and he's taken it a step further to catch them 6 or 7 years prior to that. So to me, that says a lot about him and his love for Wendell and just his devotion for our young folks and the future generation of Wendell. So I personally appreciate that, being a parent of two, and it's folks like that that make Wendell a great place to live. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Lutz,
I have nothing tonight.
Commissioner Myrick,
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Commissioner Boyette.
Hi, was riding down Third Street late yesterday afternoon, and I happened to notice on the basketball court beside the police station, probably 15 or 20 teenagers out there playing basketball.
Yeah.
And if it had been maybe less than 10, I might would have stopped, and so wouldn't too many people see me get embarrassed, but they seem to be having a big time over there on the basketball court, and I think it just speaks to the need of more places around town and maybe away from the park on the other side of town.
Yep.
Increasing sort of those parks and rec opportunities and giving kids a productive place to go and things to do. And also, as far as the police is concerned, I saw the email where Officer Opensenko has decided to leave us. I think he did a great job while he was here. Probably one of the most personable police officers I've ever met. I feel like he just got here, but it appears as though he wants to move on, and I just wanted to say that we wish him all the best.
Commissioner Joyner.
A couple things. One, I got the chance Tuesday night, I think it was Tuesday night, I was getting ready to grill out, wanted to grab something for the grill, ran by Grill Billy's, and as I was standing there waiting to get stuff, they're doing a Ducks Unlimited event at Grill Billy's on a Tuesday night. So by the time I walk back outside, there's 50 pickup trucks parked all up by Town Hall and down this way, and that's just a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And then Saturday they had Mr. Myron Mixon, the mayor, and the Best in Barbecue here, again, packed down here. So I guess that was Saturday daytime. And then Saturday night at 5, I took great joy, and I will say this, when I first came on the board and we had our first work session, I made what I thought was a brilliant argument that we should allow more social media to push into the public comment period. After living and being on the board for 3 years and watching a couple of our social media channels, I would be a little more hesitant on that. But I got great joy out of going in and finding every single post where someone asked for a restaurant that you could sit down at that had multiple types of food and also served alcohol. It was also family friendly, that was centrally located. And I responded to every single one of them. Yes, as a matter of fact, we can do that. We're doing it tonight. Ever's Kitchen opens at 5. So Ever's Kitchen opened at 5. I ate there Saturday night. We ate there Sunday night. I got takeout. And when I went back the second night, I ordered more. So when I get home tonight, I'm going to eat leftovers of Ever's Kitchen. Drunk Man noodles are amazing.
Yeah, good.
But I haven't had anything that wasn't good. Very happy to see them overwhelmed with business. Everyone give them a little time as they get used to the fact that if you open a business in Wendell, we'll pack it out for you night after night. I think it's a great thing. So I was happy to see that. It's good to see the private sector driving people into downtown, and that's what's happened in the past week, just in 3 little instances.
Thank you. I wanted to real quickly thank the Passage Church for the Easter egg hunt they organized and carried out for the town of Wendell. That was a huge success, mobs of people, and I wanted to appreciate them taking care of that. They were great citizens for us here in Wendell. I want to remind you real quickly that Saturday, April 14th at 8 a.m. the community garden is going to open. It's all tilled up and ready for planting, fertilizing, and they're going to construct some fences. And everything that you need to help and plant will be there, and they would love for you to come out and join them for that. I found out today that I've been asked to participate on the 2019 Community Health Needs Assessment Steering Committee for Wake County. I'm not exactly positive what the purpose of this group is, other than to create a report that will go to the Wake County Commissioners, but if I accept it, it's an opportunity to shine the light on Wendell and have Wendell participate in something and I think that's important. The next thing I wanted to mention was the UDO. I was here when the UDO was adopted, and it was my understanding that it was a fluid document that reflected the time that we were in at that time, which was, I believe, 2009. Things are very different now than they were in 2009. But we anticipated there would be needs to change as the times changed and as the economy changed, and that's why we talk about the UDO up here a lot, because times have changed, and that's good. But it was anticipated, and it may be that there are areas that it is too burdensome, there may be areas that it isn't enough. It's something that, like I said, it's fluid, and we're going to constantly be reevaluating it. On the note of Stacy Alston, I also got a call today, not from him, but with all this enthusiasm about everything he's done, I thought I would bring it up. The reverse raffle fundraiser at East Wake High School, the Warrior Booster Club, is coming up. And if you are interested in buying a ticket, it's $100 for a chance at $10,000, which I think is great. I can put you in contact with someone if you'll contact me, and I know that you all know how to do that. Let's see. I also want to remind you that Saturday, April 21st is opening day at the park from 8 till 3. There'll be a lot of great things going on out there, hit, pitch, and run competition, home run derby, inflatables. All the games are going to be taking place, so go out there and have a wonderful time doing that. And Saturday, April 21st, Wendell Falls is having an event called Wendell Falls Recycles from 9 until noon, and they're going to celebrate beautifying the community. I'm going to be out there with them to kick off the event, and they're going to divide into teams, and there's going to be challenges to have a little scavenger hunt to collect and recycle things across the trails and roads in the area. And that'll be fun, and you get a nice little goodie bag and an opportunity to be out there, so I hope that you'll join us out there. All right, so I think that's the end of our meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?